Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Neil Parfit and welcome to my channel. It is a smoky mid-June up here in Canada because everything is on fire. And also Apple has just released a new Mac Pro with Apple Silicon. And with that, the transition out of Intel is complete. For those of you who weren't here 3.5 years ago, I can't believe that much time has gone by. I had bought the Mac Pro rack after waiting years and years and years for an update. And now, almost 4 years later, my machine is officially defunct because it's the old technology. It was kind of like 15 years ago if you had just bought a G5 and then you found out they were switching to Intel. It's the same thing, just again, history always repeats itself, right? So here I am. I'm a composer, and that's what I use this machine for, day in and day out. And as soon as this new machine dropped, I was like, oh, cool. And then I was looking at it and I was thinking, interesting. I have my thoughts about it. We can agree, disagree, we can have discourse. I'm sure there will be trolling. You know, we're all friends on the internet, right? But I'm just giving you my observations as a professional in the film and television business, and take it or leave it. Let's see where we go. Just so you're all aware, I'm not reading a teleprompter. I don't have a laptop in front of me or paper guiding where this ramble is going to go. So if I'm wrong about something, let me know. But let's just see where we go. So first and foremost, let me tell you the machine I have right now. I have the 2019 Mac Pro 7.1. I have the 28 core Intel, and I have 768 gigs of RAM in it. I'm using every single PCI Express slot. One of them has a carrier card on it with 6 SSDs, and it's just doing its thing. I'm running 5 4K monitors at 60 hertz, which is more than enough for audio work because we don't use the GPUs for any rendering tasks. It's just put the image up on a screen and get to work. So this machine is more than capable of that. And I'm using the stock video card, the 580X. And because it's not a full MPX module height, I had all that extra space for everything else. Some audio interfacing, some DSP cards, some Avid cards, etc., etc. So now that this new machine's out, people are asking me like, oh, are you just going to sell it and just get the new one? And the answer is absolutely not. And the reason is, first and foremost, as a business tool, everything is working flawlessly. And the oldest rule in the book is don't rock the boat when you're working. It's kind of ironic because Apple has full end-to-end hardware control of their own products. Yet, unlike my Windows days when I was on XP, every time Apple releases a new operating system, everything breaks. Like, there's only been a few times where it's been a seamless upgrade. But ever since like Monterey and Ventura and all these things, stuff doesn't work. It's such a pain in the ass. So if I buy this new machine, you can't downgrade it below what it gets released with because they lock it out, etc., etc. So if I buy this new machine, I'd have to upgrade everything to the latest OS. And if things break, I'm kind of out of luck. And I can't have that in a working environment. So my machine is doing what it does, and it's eating everything I throw at it for breakfast. So why am I arbitrarily going to change the machine just to have Apple Silicon? Doesn't matter right now. There will be a point in the future, maybe 2 or 3 years from now, where there is an actual forced crossroad where it's like, okay, to get all these new things, I have to abandon the old things. But none of the software I'm using right now is forcing me to make that choice, that hard choice that I don't want to do. So it's just business as usual for me. Sure, there's a part of me that's miffed that I bought a machine and now it's completely, obsolete in the eyes of Apple. And it was really expensive. It was 18,000 or so Canadian, plus the RAM, plus all the third-party stuff. But I had a business plan in place and I bought it through my company and I had contracts coming through. So the thing was paid for on arrival, technically. And the last 3 years or so, it's just been used to make money. So it's a perfectly fine business investment. Anyway, so let's just dive into some of the machine specifics. So Apple has chose to use the same physical form factor as the previous version, and that's that chonky tower with the cheese grater pattern on it. And you can get the rack mount version of it for $500 or $600 more. And here's my first thing, which I knew would be the case. They were going on and on about how modular this system is, blah, 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 blah. Here we are with a new machine, same cases. Can I take out my motherboard and Intel CPU and swap it out with their new mainboard and Mac processor? Of course not. So what's modular about that? Nothing. So one thing that caught my eye is that the maximum RAM on it is 192 gigabytes. And for most applications, that's plenty. But I can tell you, as a composer here writing orchestral kind of music with large sample libraries, when I have everything open and Logic is running, Vienna Ensemble Pro is running, Pro Tools is up, everything is just ready to go, my resting template now is over 300 gigs. So if I get this new machine, it's going to be hitting swap immediately on the SSDs, and it's going to be writing and reading to those constantly to load exactly what I have now. If I'm buying a new machine, I'm not going to hammer these SSDs with swap writing because that will lower the life of the SSDs. So I'm going to wait at least until the second or third generation. And that's part of my plan initially. Like, these machines are supposed to be in service for 5 to 7 years. So that's part of my timeline. We're almost 4 years in already. The GPU specs are really impressive. The amount of 4 and 8K video can crunch through is amazing. Like, when you compare it to the Afterburner and all that stuff. I don't use any of that, so it doesn't matter. All I care about GPU wise is how many screens can I run and are they smooth? And the answer is, as I stated before, I run 5 4K screens at 60 hertz. They're all butter smooth. It's fine. So this new machine will be absolutely the same or better for that. But all the extra GPU cores and stuff is irrelevant for sound right now. Hopefully at some point, developers will figure out a way to easily process audio with these GPU cores. Because if that happens, we're going to have so much power, we're not going to know what to do with. The other thing I noticed is PCI Express is now version 4. It's still technically sort of out of date, but it's way faster than PCI Express 3. But I've noticed that on my Intel Mac Pro, I have 4 16x lanes, and on the new one, there's only 2. So only 2 of those slots are going to allow you to run a 16x card full tilt. Maybe it's a wash because PCI Express 4 is so much faster. I don't know. Yeah, what else? I had so many other thoughts, and now I'm forgetting everything I wanted to talk about. Oh yeah, okay. So for audio, unless you're doing some intensive sample library loading, usually it's orchestral writing because those libraries are so massive, there's no advantage to all these internal SSDs running at PCI Express 4 speeds. Like, it doesn't matter for audio. With video, the sheer amount of data that has to fly back and forth, it's beneficial. You're running a ton of 4K or 8K streams. You need that constant data going down the pipe. And audio takes nowhere near as much processing as video does, especially when you're reading data off a drive. And even if it could, a lot of these applications don't even take full advantage of the pipe. On my existing machine, my sample library drives can push 7 gigabytes a second, read, no problem. But when I'm loading all these sample libraries, it peaks out at like 1.5 gigs a second because Contact just won't grab any more than that at one time. So there's no benefit to PCI Express 4 there either. Now, they did mention that this machine can basically ingest a ton of 4K, 8K streams at the same time, and that's awesome. And you'd need dedicated capture hardware for that. So this is what I was kind of thinking about last night. Like, who's this machine for? Because the Mac Studio and the Mac Pro are essentially technically the same at a CPU level and GPU level if you max them out, as well as the RAM capacity. So this machine would be perfect for someone in film, a whole bunch of real-time 4K or 8K streams. And this is where my argument comes in, where I think the tower is almost useless. So if you're ingesting that many streams, you're going to have dedicated PCI Express cards, and all those cards are going to have little fans on them that are really loud. And if you're capturing in a whole bunch of streams, you're going to have multiple of those cards in there. So all of a sudden, this tower is going to sound like a hairdryer. And if we're talking about data, if you're using a carrier card for SSDs, PCI Express 4, all the cards I've seen have fans on them. So all of a sudden, you're going to have all these little fans in this machine, and it's going to be as loud as like an Xserve. And if you're in a production environment, You can't have that machine right beside you. It's just too loud. Like, this is the loudness of my studio now, and all my equipment's turned on. Like, imagine having four hair dryers on right beside me. Who can work under those conditions? Like, it just doesn't make sense. So, out of these two Mac Pros that they've released, I feel like the rack mount version is the one that they should have stuck with, and the towers sort of, why bother? You're going to put all these really loud cards in it. That's not going to be beside you. Put that in the machine room, put a Corning Thunderbolt extension on it, and you can have your screens and all that stuff 30 meters away. It doesn't need to be physically near you. It's going to be with all that noisy capture hardware in a different room. I also noticed that Apple is still selling their wheels for over $700 Canadian. Like, are you out of your minds? So thinking of this as a composer or someone in sound, I almost feel like unless it's very specific scenarios, like running a whole bunch of PCI Express cards, of Avid cards or whatever, you're going to want to get the Mac Studio. It's the same processor, it's the same RAM, it's the same GPU. It has half the connectivity, but still a lot, and it's all Thunderbolt 4. Honestly, I don't see an advantage. The cost difference between them are almost $4,000 Canadian, and I can find a Thunderbolt expansion chassis for less than $4,000 that accomplishes the same thing. So honestly, I feel like these Mac Pros are almost like Apple's proof of concept that they were able to transition, integrate PCI Express properly. But I hope their next machine is smaller. Like, I don't see a reason for these towers to be so massive now, especially when the thermals of their own CPUs are so good versus the Intels. And I also don't see the advantage of the rack being used in a server environment because even the Mac Studio has 10G networking on it. And in the same amount of space, you could probably fit 5 of the Mac Studios sideways. So would you want one machine crunching, or would you want 5 in the same amount of space? So yeah, I feel like except for some extreme video cases, this Mac Pro Tower and rack are kind of an oddball. When I was deploying this system before, my MADI card is 192 channels in, 192 channels out. But now you have companies like Digital Audio Denmark that have the Core 256. That's like a half rack box that can do 256 in, 256 out on Thunderbolt 3. So do we need these internal cards anymore? The only place I'd see it is these internal SSDs taking advantage of all that PCI Express lanes. For me now, it's just this weird in-between system before they create something smaller that maybe has less PCI Express slots. There's just a lot of wasted space in that machine right now. So yeah, I am impressed with the tech, but the form factor, no, it doesn't make any sense to me really in 2023, except for some very specific situations. The Mac Studio covers all the bases for 99% of the people and use cases out there. So me personally, I'm going to use this machine until I can't. Hopefully that's 2 to 4 more years. Who knows? I might eat my words. But if I do transition out of it, I'll keep it because it will make the perfect Vienna Ensemble Pro server because it can take so much memory. As I said, right now I have 768 gigs of RAM. I can put 1.5 terabytes in there. So I could have every sound loaded in existence that I'd ever need. And it's not going to have any implications on my main system. The system can just be on as a secondary sampler for those orchestral scenarios. And if I'm not doing orchestral scenarios, I could just have a Mac Studio that I could bring around with me anywhere and not compromise on speed and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's my thoughts about this whole thing. And I've probably missed a whole bunch of things I wanted to talk about, but that's what happens when you don't make a list. Anyway, have a great Friday, and I'll talk to you all soon. See you later.